Amy said, I'm Faye Kuosman. I'm a horticulture agent here in Woodford County, and I've been here for the past 8 years. And over that time, I have worked with Joe Lacefield, who's here with us as well. Joe Lacefield is a private lands biologist with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and he shares this building with us. So we have partnered on several programs. One of those, which is the shiitake mushroom production. Of course, this is the first time we've done it on Zoom. We're used to doing it as a hands-on workshops. This is very different. But we have a video to show you that we've made, and so we'll walk through that. But Joe, if you want to just say a couple things.
Hi, everyone. I basically became interested in fungi several years ago when I took a class of shiitake production that was offered through the office. So got me started 15 or so years ago.
So I am going to share my screen. Make sure everyone can. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Amy, can you see that?
We're good to go.
Okay, excellent. So this is a presentation on, as you know, growing shiitake mushrooms in logs. Now I know that some of you may have grown mushrooms in bags, like in straw or something along those lines. We're not going to talk about that today. If you have questions, don't hesitate to ask about those as well. But we can answer those or help you with that at another time. So this will be specifically on growing mushrooms in logs. We're going to show a video that Joe and I made when we were prepping for an actual hands-on class, and it walks through all of the steps from harvesting the wood and what kind of wood you want to actually inoculating the logs. So it's about 7.5 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and show that.
Good afternoon. I'm Faye Kuosman, and I'm the horticulture agent with the Woodford County Extension Office. And today we are out here in Woodford County harvesting some trees for a mushroom cultivation class. The mushrooms we are going to be doing are shiitake, lion's mane, and oyster. So we'll be showing you what logs, what type of wood to cut for those species.
Hi, I'm Joe Lacefield. I'm a private lands wildlife biologist, and I often help Extension with some of their workshops. Today we're going to be selecting some trees for a mushroom cultivation class, and we're looking for oak right in this particular area for shiitake. Oak will do best for shiitake, makes better fruiting conditions. So generally, when you want to cut these, you want to cut them about 30 inches. But if they're a larger diameter, like at the base of a tree, like this guy, you might want to cut them 24 inches because then it's not too heavy to move around easily. If you're wanting to force flush them or put them in water, you just don't want to hurt yourself trying to move logs from one location to another. So that's the real reason for making them whatever length they are. It's not a requirement that they be X number of inches. We're talking about tree species that we're going to select for growing our mushrooms. Shiitake generally prefer oak. They do best on oak. They will grow on many hardwoods, but for longevity, oak is the number one. Shiitakes will also grow on maple. This happens to be a black maple. Many people would just assume it's a sugar maple, but it's a black maple. You can see it has smooth bark compared to the oak. This is a chinkapin oak. And this is the chinkapin oak leaf, and this is the maple leaf. Maple has opposite branching, oak has alternate. Learn your tree species and you'll learn to find wild mushrooms as well as grow cultivated mushrooms.
Hi everyone, I'm Faye Kuosman with the Woodford County Extension Office. I'm the horticulture agent here, and we have Joe Lacefield, a private lands biologist for Fish and Wildlife. And today we are going to be drilling holes to put in plug spawn for shiitake mushrooms. So how we do this is we're going to partner up, so we have one person holding the log and one person drilling.
Very good.
Okay.
The holes are going to be approximately 4 inches apart. That's basically your hand width, and we'll stagger them somewhat around the log to increase the mycelium colonization of the log.
Okay.
I'll drill those when we flip the log around. If you want to, well, yeah, that's fine.
Welcome to the next segment of our series. In this one, we are going to be showing you how we put in the plug spawn.
Not everyone has access to a high-speed angle grinder to drill their holes like we just demonstrated. A regular drill will work just fine, a cordless drill or a corded drill. However, for the 1/4 inch dowel spawn, you'll want a 5/16 inch drill bit. And you want to mark the depth with a piece of tape so that you don't drill it too deep or too shallow. If you drill it too shallow, your plug will mushroom when you go to hammer it into the log.
Okay, so we just hammered those down to where they are flush with the log.
And for the class, you want to make sure all your logs are drilled before you start hammering any of the plugs in. So I've had the wax in my pocket so that it warms up a little bit. It makes it a little easier to spread. This is the wax that you don't have to heat and melt, although those types can be used as well. But you're basically going to get some on your finger and firmly place it on the plug lid, or the end of the plug, sealing the hole. And sometimes you'll have extra. You don't want the plugs to be sticking up out of there. The wax is to keep foreign fungi from moving into the log and to keep the plugs from drying out and the mycelium dying before it colonizes the log. So as far as maintenance of your logs and keeping them viable, you want to make sure you place them in a shaded area, hopefully under deciduous trees where they get plenty of rainfall. If under a drought condition, for example, you might want to hose them every once in a while so that the logs don't get too dry. And you can notice that if the ends get really cracked and check open, it might be getting a little bit too dry for newly inoculated logs. If you want to flush them after they've established, to colonize the log, the mycelium will be little white spots on the ends of the log. At that point, you'll know it's fully established, and you can then force it to flush when you want some mushrooms. You can do that about every 8 weeks within normal temperature ranges. So usually in March, I'll start flushing a few logs by soaking them in water for 24 hours. I have a tub that's basically big enough to submerge them. You can put weights on them if you want. You don't necessarily have to do that, but after they soak for 24 hours, I like to then put them in a tub with a little bit of water in the bottom of the tub, and I tent plastic sheeting over it so that it increases the humidity. It also decreases the bugs that might try to get in there, and the mushrooms will develop in a few days. And it takes them a few days, depending on temperature, to fully develop for harvest. It normally takes a year for a log to become fully colonized and capable of fruiting. Remember, the mushroom itself is just the fruit, like an apple on an apple tree. The organism is the mycelium in the log. And after a year, you'll get your larger flushes. And usually it's more than a year before you can fully see the capability of the log.
Okay, so that went through the process of inoculating the shiitake mushrooms. Now for our classes that we do, our hands-on classes, we also do oyster mushrooms and lion's mane, which also you can do in the plug spawn. And So those are fun. We used to just do shiitake, but we started doing the lion's mane and the oyster mushrooms as well a couple years ago. So you would do the same process with both of those. Just a few more slides we have here, and then I'll kind of let Joe talk through some other things. But if, like I said, if you have questions, we go into questions at the end. But this shows you the stacking, and there's different stacking methods. I'll go down to the one, Joe, that you have of your mushroom logs, if you want to talk about that.
So you'll notice the ends are cracking on some of these. What I'll do is place them actually on the ground so that they absorb some of the moisture from the ground instead of watering them. These are logs that I inoculated this spring and have not been watered. And actually a couple of them produced mushrooms with the rain we got a few weeks ago. You can see the mycelium coming, little white spots on the ends of the logs. That's something that would tell you that it could produce or be ready to produce or fruit. But usually it takes a year before you get the mycelium growing to the end of the log like this. And by forced flush, what I mean is soaking them in water and allowing them, 24 hours in the log in the water will make the logs fruit very heavily.
Okay, so here's a picture of some different options for forcing your logs. People throw them in little pools, in livestock waters, anything that you can find to put them in. I think, Joe, this is a picture of yours, which I'm not sure what you have.
Right, it's a livestock trough, and I've put plastic tinting over them to basically increase the humidity and to decrease the fungus gnats that will get on them. You'll have putting them in water like this. I only have an inch of water maybe in the bottom, but that will keep the slugs from finding them because they'll eat the mushrooms if you're just letting them fruit naturally and be out there on the ground.
So as far as the forcing, and you might have mentioned this, how often can you do that?
If you're doing it from a production standpoint, you can force a log every 8 weeks. It will work through the log fairly quickly if you do that.
We may have already mentioned this, but if you're not forcing the logs and you're just letting them sit out naturally, which I do at home because I just haven't taken the time, just had them for a couple of years and haven't taken the time to do the forcing. But normally you'll get the mushrooms in the spring and the fall when the temperatures at night are cooler. Is that correct, Jim?
That's correct. Typically April and October are when they will naturally fruit on their own. Sometimes March, it just depends on the weather. When you start having warm days, a lot of high humidity, big heavy rains, and then suddenly you have a cool night, it can shock them and tend to make them flush very consistently.
Yeah, so I had some off of mine this spring, and then I need to be going out there after the rain we just had because there's probably some more fruiting right now. But these logs will produce for approximately 10 years or so, and sometimes more. I don't know how long you've had yours, Joe, but I've known some folks that have had them for 10 years and they're still producing.
I've had some that have lasted 10 years, but usually 5 to 7 years, if you're forcing them, is a very unexpected length.
So here's a picture of, I guess, as we call that, pinning, when the mushrooms are just starting to come out. And I think these are yours, Joe, on here too. So it was just happening. You can see it's under the plastic there that we had the previous picture of. Here's where the mushrooms are just starting to come out. And here's as they're about the size to harvest. We do a couple workshops a year, and we do one in March because March would be the time frame to inoculate in the spring, and then we do one in October in the fall, and that would be the time for cutting the logs. And we normally, Joe, you say to inoculate them within 2 weeks of cutting, so that something else can't be introduced into the logs if they sit too long.
That's correct. You don't want another fungus to be able to get initiated before you inoculate with the shiitake. Maybe you'll get by with a month, but I like to do it within a couple of weeks. If not, I've done it the day I've cut the logs without any problems. I know there's been some people proclaim that the tree has an immunity, that if you inoculate them too quick, it won't take, but basically the time of year that we're doing this is targeting when nutrient flow is moving through the xylem and phloem, and I think that helps get the mycelium moving as well. So I don't think that's a problem.
And then as far as sourcing, so we've ordered our mushroom spawn from Field and Forest, and thank you, Sharon, for posting their website on there. I'm also going to point out here under our resource page I have pulled up now, we have a Shiitake mushrooms page through the University of Kentucky. So you can see up there forestry.ca.uky.edu/mushrooms, but you could easily just put in your Google search Shiitake mushrooms UKY, which stands for University of Kentucky, and you'll see on here there's several publications that walk you through what we showed in our video, and also one that is resources for shiitake growers, and it tells you all of the companies where you can purchase the supplies. So as I mentioned, we got from Field and Forest, and someone was asking about the plug wax. There's only one option for that, and it's just an easy little bottle. You can see on their website, it's just plug wax that you cover them with. And then it's always good to label the logs as well, so that you can remember when you inoculated and what you used, if you're using something more than just shiitake, if you wanted to try lion's mane or oyster mushrooms. And Joe's really introduced me to all these different types of mushrooms. We do some walks in the spring. He's an expert on identifying mushrooms. So I've been introduced to lion's mane and oysters from him that grow wild, and they are just absolutely delicious. I had no idea how flavorful, and of course shiitake I love too. But just something else to try as well in the logs. But these are great little things you can use to label the logs. Let's see, that's it for the slides I have.